Welcome to the PUCL public meeting on judicial accountability.
Finally, I will introduce the speakers, and both Aspi and Chandar are old friends of mine, very approachable, and despite their seniority, despite the standing that they have been very helpful to all of us whenever we need help. They have come out of the way to help us. As far as Aspi is concerned, Aspi Chinoy, he is the senior most advocate in Bombay High Court. A very respected person, liked by all. I mean, though he's been my opponent in some cases, he's been a very fair opponent, and I would say that he has taken up a number of PI cases, one of which was the beef ban matter, and also the issue of illegal constructions under the MRTP Act, which would challenge 32A. He has also defended TISTA in the bail application. He has defended Indra Jaising and Amit Grover in the FCRA matter. He has also at the time of the riots, the issue of relief given, which was not being extended properly, he went to Ahmedabad and took up that case and fought for it on it.
So I looked at this topic, and initially I thought, well, it's really important because Tista's a friend, and what she has done only, I think we know how much she has contributed. But I think Tista and Himanshu are symptoms, and the issue is much larger than them. And I really am going to digress because I believe that in many ways we are living in the 25th hour, and that what you are seeing in Tista's case or Himanshu's case or anyone else's case is just a small tip of an iceberg which is going to erupt one of these days. So I am going to digress in two areas. I want to see where we have come that something like this can happen. How we reached there. What the court did to either enable it or to stop it. And what hope there is of judicial recourse in such situations. So I am going to digress out. But I am not going to, you see, if I was to tell you that of course it's atrocious what they've done to Tista. Of course that the judgment of Justice Khanvilkar is a stain, actually. It's a blemish on judicial conscience and constitution. But these are trite words. We all know that. What we have to understand is how we ended up here and where are we, which is far more important. Look, I believe, I'll come to the end and then go somewhere. That there were conflicting ideas of India. There was the Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar idea of India. The one of religious equality, of tolerance. And there was the Savarkar, Golwalkar idea of India, which has now been short-formed into Hindutva. In independence, the Nehru-Ambedkar idea won through. And it remained that way for years. I'm only giving you the summary of the end, and I'll tell you why we reached where we are. But somewhere in the last 10 years, 8 years, we are now in the Savarkar version of India. Let's have no bones about it. The constitution remains, all those fancy words, the nice clauses, the institutions, the courts, the election commission, but they mean very little. You are now living in Savarkar's India. De facto, you have very limited recourse. Why I want to say this is very often we don't believe what's happening around us. And we delude ourselves into thinking it's not happening. So, when I look back, I think we're somewhere at the time of the Weimar Republic in 1933 in Germany. And you're very close to cataclysmic events. I want to therefore go back. I'm not being alarmist, but I'm being far more realist. He says that we pretend that we are, the institutions of the state are there, the constitution is there, we are safe, till they come to get you. Then you are like Tista or Himanshu or anyone else. There is very little recourse. So I don't want to spend 15 minutes in saying how we got here and the role the court played, and then take it a bit on from there. Might be a little boring, but I'll try to make it brief. So let me go back to saying, we all know that India is a multicultural, very diverse society. In 1931, when the Congress had the Karachi session, Gandhi introduced the Fundamental Rights Bill by saying that the essence of India is religious neutrality and religious tolerance. And he passed it at that time. At the same time, then and many years thereafter, there was a conflicting idea of India. It was first enunciated in, I think, 20s by Savarkar, in Who is a Hindu, where he defined India as a culturally Hindu country, as an ethno-religious identity. It's important to have these concepts because otherwise we can't understand why we are where we are. That's really the Hindu Rashtra concept. Now, ethno-religious identity, cultural identity, necessarily excluded all other religions and cultures. But Savarkar's gripe was about Muslims and Christians, because he said they neither treat this as their holy land nor as their motherland. The others he was willing to tolerate. Savarkar went a little further. In 1938, he said Muslims must entertain no idea but those of glorification of the Hindu race and culture. They may stay in this country, but wholly subordinated to the Hindu nation, claiming nothing, not even citizens' rights. These are important words because today you are living in Savarkar's India. Don't make a mistake about it. Savarkar went a little further. In the 30s, he talked of the minorities problem, and he greatly appreciated Hitler's ability to cope with the minority problems. In the 1940s, when this went on, both Jinnah and Savarkar believed in a two-nation theory. The difference was that Jinnah wanted a territory of undivided India which would be for Muslims. Savarkar said no, Muslims can stay in the same land, but living in a subordinate position to Hindus. That is very clear to him. Now, in 1947, there were conflicting views. There was the Gandhi-Nehru-Ambedkar view of a plural multicultural India. And there was the Savarkar-Savarkar view which talked of it as a majoritarian state, a religious, cultural Hindu state. In 1947, the Ambedkarites, the Gandhiites had their way. Rajiv Gandhi, speaking on this, said it's very important to realize that it's not a two-nation theory. It was a Pakistan and a multicultural, plural India. Although it's often termed by the RSS and the VHP as the unfinished agenda, because their view has always been that if the Muslims got Pakistan, it's a short change to say that the Hindus can't get the Hindustan. Basically, that's been the way it has. Now, we can fast forward. As late as 1973, the Supreme Court of India in Keshavanandi said secularism was a part of our basic constitutional framework. In 1976, the word secularism was introduced for the first time in the constitution. When Ambedkar had been very careful to avoid the word secularism because secularization and secularism is a whole new debate which I don't want to waste time on now. But the 1980s, the problem started. The Congress party, according to me, undermined secularism by playing up to voting blocs and stoking divisive pressures. In 1985, an inexperienced Rajiv Gandhi buckled under pressure from Muslim groups and bought the Shah Banu Amendment, which was really the beginning of the end as I saw it. Then concerned about losing Hindu support and being called pseudo-secular, he sought to mollify Hindu sentiments by giving concessions on the Ayodhya issue. Don't forget that Rajiv Gandhi opened the gates of the Ayodhya mosque. People forget that it wasn't. In fact, the BJP was a non-entity at that time, and it did not have this on its agenda at all. The unlocking of the gates was manipulated through a judicial order with the aid of the Uttar Pradesh government under Congress control. Then there was, of course, the massive Ayodhya movement and the Babri Masjid demolition in 1992, where Prime Minister Narasimha Rao spent those 4 hours in inexplained solitude, doing nothing to stop it while everything was happening around him. The government then dismissed 4 BJP governments on the basis that they were too inclined towards the Ayodhya movement to do justice in the matter. In 1994, a 9-judge bench dealt with a challenge to this, the dissolution of 4 state assemblies, and said that secularism has a positive as well as a negative content. One of which was that the state and the executive cannot espouse a religion. And they said that was an affirmative duty. They even went further, that if a state government was to espouse religion and act contrary to the mandate of secularism, it should be removed as a failure of constitutional machinery. The only problem is, while talking about the states, they forgot that this could be at the center. And who dismisses the central government? No one. But it's a conundrum which no one had even thought of at that time. Now, immediately after the Bomai judgment of 94, there were state elections, especially in Maharashtra. A lot of campaigning went on Hindutva. If you remember Manmohan Joshi's Hindustan state and all Prabhu's case and all that. The Bombay High Court struck down 12 elections on the grounds that they were clearly pandering to religion and religious identities. The matter went to the Supreme Court in 96. And it's interesting, but Justice Verma, and this is where the complicity of the Supreme Court comes in, which we must know, although people rarely talk of it. In 96, Justice Verma was part of the Bomai bench, now entertaining the matter in which vituperative comments have been made on Hindutva's basis. He then referred to diverse texts on Hinduism and then made the interesting slate of hand movement which equated Hindutva with Hinduism. Then he said Hinduism is a way of life. So is Hindutva a way of life. So it's not a matter of religion. So there can't be bigotry. In effect, by that one movement, he undermined the entire secular basis of India because he licensed a rampant appeal to political Hinduism on the grounds that it was a way of life and religion. Immediately following that matter, the same batch was Manohar Joshi's matter. In Manohar Joshi's matter, he had gone so far as to say that Maharashtra should be the first Hindu state. Now, how to deal with that? So Verma then came up with this idea that this is an aspirational statement. It's not an appeal to religion. He then said, in Prabhu's case, I've already decided that an appeal to Hindutva is not an appeal to religion. And so he let off Manohar Joshi also in the matter. These 2 decisions stand, if they can, be in a hall of judicial infamy because they opened the door to where we are today. They legitimized it. In a short while, from 2 seats in 1984, the BJP won 161 seats in the Lok Sabha and became the single largest party there. During all these years that came up after that, there has been a change in the narrative. Secularism is appeasement. secularism is secularism. Benefits to majority community is a matter of faith, and there the equivalence came. And after the BJP won the 2014 and 2019 elections, the process of subversion of our constitutional secularism and the imposition of a majoritarian ethnocracy gained peace. We have to realize where we came from. What has happened then? The virtual exclusion of the Muslim from the political sphere. The last three members of parliament, three Muslim members of parliament, the BJP, resigned a few days ago. Now there isn't a single Muslim member of parliament in the BJP. There has not been a Muslim MLA in any of the assemblies. So the Muslim has ceased to become relevant politically. And the strategy of the BJP has been to say that if we polarize and consolidate Hindu votes, we don't need Muslim votes. And the exclusion of Muslim votes is a matter of irrelevancy thereafter. And then, with the political exclusion of the Muslim, comes brazen majoritarian politics, privileging of a majority community, the ethnicization of the state when the whole cabinet goes to Ayodhya, where everyone prays. I'm not saying culturally prayer is bad, but this is an ethnicization of the state itself. And a shift to a majoritarian politics which has succeeded in bringing a narrative that any form of secularism is actually appeasement politics, and therefore results in more polarization. The most important thing is the targeting of fraternization. The BJP's policy and Savarkar's policy was a complete non-fraternization between Muslims and Hindus. So therefore you have love jihad, you have all these riots where someone tries marrying interfaith, allegations of converting young Hindu women, which are so rare, but becomes a whole major narrative, a narrative of fear and paranoia. And then there are laws. Do you know that in Gujarat, they have a stratagem of declaring a town a disturbed area. Once it's a disturbed area, a government can prevent a Muslim from buying a house in a Hindu area, or from a Hindu selling a block to a Muslim. And when the Chief Minister was asked in 2019, he said we have set this rule in areas where there have been riots to tell the Muslims that they might buy property only in their own areas. And then of course, you pass laws which criminalize cow slaughter and beef. That's another saga. For 5 constitution benches in 50 years, the Supreme Court had allowed bullock slaughter beyond the circuit. An 8-judge bench under Justice Lahoti reversed all those judgments by saying that those judgments had not realized that after the bullock becomes inappropriate for agriculture, it still gives dung. And Justice Mathur, in a dissent, has said, it is a little strange to say that 5 constitution benches over 50 years did not know that bullocks give dung. That's the way life is. Then, banning non-vegetarian food in holy cities. For example, now, the state of UP banned orders in Haridwar, Rishikesh, Barasana, Ayodhya, Chitrakoot, Devban. In 21, they notified 22 out of 70 wards in Mathura and Vrindavan as holy pilgrimage sites, banning the sale of non-vegetarian food. And then, what ominous for all of us, there is this osmosis between state action and vigilante action, which should also remind you of the 32s and the 33s, where the SA actually became a part of government later. So the vigilante groups, they have a movement called a Gaon Rakshak Dal. They liaise with the police. They intercept whenever they think there is cow movement. They brutally assault anyone. If he is a Hindu, then he gets off lighter to If he's a Muslim, he dies. Then of course, the vigilantes also attack anyone who marries a Hindu woman or interfaith marriage. They're always there. In fact, it's become such a problem that people have wondered whether under the Special Marriage Act you should give notice. Because the moment you give notice, that is given to the vigilante groups who then pile in on you. I'm saying this only as exemplification of where we have come from where we were. And then there is a troll army which lampoons, harasses, victimizes everyone from Arun Shuri for his son who was not born properly there to all, and this propaganda blitz is carried on with no response. And you must understand, judges don't live in an ivory tower. And judgments, especially of constitutional courts, are always affected by the social, political environment in which they exist. I'll give you a simple answer. Take a matter like Ayodhya. When the masjid was demolished in 1992, everyone, including the people, expressed remorse, regret. No one would have suggested. Then came the movements, the Ayodhya movement, the BJP coming to power. When the matter was heard 10 years later, it was unthinkable to restore the mosque. The matter had been lost before it was argued. The court may put it in all the good language at once, but I have no doubt that a large part of their judgment was necessarily influenced by the context of the political mobilization of the time, which made it impossible to do anything else. So you have Justice Chandruchu probably mentioning it as an egregious wrong in the Indian Constitution and then awarding the land over. But that's because the Ayodhya matter was lost before it was on. It was lost in the politics of India. Then there has been this relentless attack on secularism. In fact, it's interesting to note that when Modi had his 2009 victory, in his speech, he mocked his opponents by saying that no political party had mustered the courage to mention the word secularism. And he was right. In fact, Hamid Ansari, his vice president, stated later that the term secularism has almost gone from the political vocabulary, replaced by secularism, as they call it, and by pseudo-secularism or appeasement. In fact, to see how far it's gone, a couple of years back, the governor of District Koshari, the chap who's there still, wrote a letter to Thackeray in which he said, "Have you suddenly turned secular yourself?" in a very pejorative tone. This is the governor in his official capacity writing that. The Prime Minister, the Home Minister from time to time make platitudinous statements. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. But this is what just that. They ensure that what they can't do, everyone under them does. And with the cover of the state. So make no mistake, this isn't the fringe. The fringe is the government. That's the way it is today. In fact, today, so effective have they been that even opposition parties are playing a soft Hindutva line. They can't muster up the courage to stand for constitutional principles. Now it is in these circumstances that we are here today. These constitutional rights, 14, 19, 29, 30, all remain. The court remains. But it really means very little today. Let me assure you, you are making a great mistake if you think you are living in Gandhi's India. You will have the unfortunate consequence of being where Pista is. Pista is not an aberration. She's just a more visible aberration. Today the norm is that you are living in a completely different India, where you do not have the rights you think you have. then you do not have the recourse which you think you have, and which is important to understand and acknowledge. Therefore, I have come to the conclusion, and which I feel is the end of the first part. I hope I have stayed too long. Is that we are now living in Savarkar's India, and you have to accept that. If you make the mistake of thinking you are living in the India where you were brought up in, born in, you are making a terrible mistake which will have great consequences for you. In Savarkar's India, the government shows no inhibitions in using state machinery, CBI, ED, whatever it is, or the Delhi police, which is like a washing machine, to target whatever it sees as its opponents and critics, or those who try to defend the old order and the old principles, and to ensure that politicians, who always have some skeletons in their cupboard, are made to vote for the right party and change their affiliation. You use UAPA against students. You bulldoze the homes of persons whom you think took part in riots. And then you of course lie through your teeth to the Supreme Court to say, no, this is only town planning and I planned it long back. Coupled with the complete decimation of institutions like the Election Commission or the CDC or almost all your institutions. Now, that brings me to probably the end, that pathway. Where do the courts go with this? The courts enable this by the 96 judgment. Make no bones about it. And they've never gone back to correct that error. Even now, once in a while they show courage. But by and large, they remain mute spectators or they use big words which mean little. Let me tell you, for example, when the freezing of the internet took place in Kashmir, our present Chief Justice sat on a bench which heard the matter for months on end. Then he passed an enormous judgment in which he said that internet is part of Article 19(1). And then what did he do? He said, but I must leave it to the government to decide when they will bring back internet. Now, if you were going to leave it to the government, why spend all this time? Or take the Pegasus story, which is an even more funny one. The petition is that the government is misusing Pegasus illegally in India. The government refuses to file an affidavit. The additional Solicitor General says, I won't file an affidavit. The normal consequence should have been the court says, if you don't file, you don't deny, it's true, you are misusing it. Then they should have given. Instead of which they set up a technical committee. Now, what is a technical committee going to do in this matter? And that's where we are today. Or take Mohammed Zubair's case, for that matter. A 2018 tweet of his regarding a movie which had been passed in 1983 by the Central Board is raked up by a Twitter account which mysteriously disappears after raking up the issue. No one knows where it went. The police immediately lodge an FIR on that. When he gets bail or attempts to get bail in one, 6 others are created. Now, Zubair was probably lucky that in the end of the day, he got bail. But Zubair is the exception. Let's go back to Nupur Sharma's case. The court initially declined to hear a petition. Said it was a disgrace that she had set India on fire and that she should apologize to the country. They also noted an interesting factor. The Delhi police filed an FIR to protect all these government people. What they do is, they file an FIR so that other governments can't arrest. But they take no steps in the matter. So, in fact, the court pointed out that Sharma was not even questioned. She gave a statement once, no arrest. Supreme Court said this. There was a hue and cry. There was a troll army. Many of them even said that Justice Pardiwala, because he was a Parsi, all Parsis should go back to Iran. I read it myself. I'm not joking. You have to realize that bigotry, and these are intelligent people. Bigotry has no bounds in India today. And then the VHP said, how could you do this? You're forgetting 1400 years of aggression. What happened? A few weeks later, Nupur Sharma refiles the petition. And this time they give her relief. And they stop all people people from arresting her anywhere. Delhi police will of course not arrest her. So she remains free. It is in this context that the Supreme Court's judgment in Zakia falls for consideration. Why did I say this? Because this is not a one-person situation. There is an infrastructure today, a political infrastructure today, which will attack, hound and victimize anyone who fights back. And you must realize that this is not the Marquis of Queensberry's rules being played here. They will find your vulnerabilities and they will attack you and they will hound you. Now, what is the recourse? In Tista's case, a 452-page judgment is delivered. Then in paragraph 307, they make those rather strange comments, about coalesced effort of disgruntled officials along with others to create a sensation by making revelations which were false. There is an audacity to question the integrity of functionaries involved, to keep the pot boiling for ulterior designs, and that they need to be in the dark. In Savarkar's India, these words were more than enough. In Gandhi's India, nothing would have happened. But in Savarkar's India, these words immediately led to an FIR and an arrest. And let me put it this way. Whatever be the merits of the main, whatever be the merits of the main judgment, these words in paragraph 307 are procedurally unfair and amount to judicially licensing revenge. They are very serious words. When the Supreme Court says you should be proceeded against, how many people down the line are going to take a different view, especially in Savarkar's India? September had never been issued a notice that any action was proposed to be taken against her, or that any findings were to be recorded against her. She had by tireless efforts ensured, through the Supreme Court often, the reinvestigation of many Gujarat cases, the conviction of so many people. This must probably be, I say with respect, the lowest ebb of judicial conscience in India to make these sort of comments about her. Really a low ebb. This part of the judgment should, and I hope will be treated as a blemish on the constitutional conscience of the Supreme Court. It should and will be treated as a blemish on the record of the Supreme Court. It will be remembered, I hope, in the lines of the ADM Jabalpur case, which talked of the diamond bright, diamond hard hope of the court in the times of the emergency, and which took about 20-30 years to realize there was a disgrace and a blot on India's judicial record. Hopefully this part of the judgment will meet the fate in time to come of ADM Jabalpur, and that the court will itself rectify this, what I think, a grave error. But I want to stress, for every Zubair or for even a Tista, there are many others. Just think about it. There is Mr. Siddiqui Kapan. He went to Hathras. He was a Kerala journalist. He was arrested in October 20. He's gone to the Supreme Court twice. He's still under arrest. The Bhima Koregar accused, they did an arrest from June 2018. And when the MBA government tried reinvesting the cases, they promptly transferred them to the NIA. And the NIA then puts all these absurd charges, including assault on Modi and assassination, and you don't get bail. Or Sharjeel Imam, arrested in March 20 in the CA riots, still there. So, I went beyond my topic, because I don't think Tista is the topic. Tista is a symptom of the times you're in. These are very, very dangerous times. What we knew of India and what we grew up in doesn't exist. And if you don't recognize that, to be to your peril. Maybe there is a future. Who knows? Majoritarian movements often end up in grief decades down the line. Maybe there are wars, maybe there are riots, maybe countries fall apart, one doesn't know. But as of today, these constitutional rights remain by and large effervescent. If you are lucky to go to the right bench of the Supreme Court, you might get luck and might get it. But there's every chance you won't. And there's every chance you'll remain incarcerated. So you have to realize today that defenders of civil liberties or citizens or whatever it is, you speak out, you object, you stand in great risk. Do it by all means, but don't be under any illusions that consequences won't follow. I hate to say this, but I think you need to know a lot of the people in 1933 and 34 thought this could never happen, that this could never happen to them. They were so well settled, they were so intellectually advanced, they were all involved in business. But these things do happen. Nations do tend to lose balance. And when majoritarian movements and ethnicity of this nature is advanced, one never knows where it goes. That's all. Thank you.